in Sacramento. So glad to be here. Thanks so much, Michelle, for recording. If you are watching later, thanks so much for joining us. We know that you are incredibly busy, so we are so thankful for this next 75 minutes of your time. Here is what you'll get in this workshop. We'll talk about executive functions and literacy, how stress and emotions impact our students' executive functions and therefore literacy. And we will leave you with some best practices for creating context in your class, at your school site, that support students' executive functions. So get some input, and then you will leave with some concrete tools of things that you can actually do. But before we do that, let's have a mindful moment. It is Monday at the end of February. How is everybody doing? 0 to 5. Put it in the chat. Personally, professionally, whatever you want to put in the chat. 0 to 5. How are you doing? I see some people are coming to you from their offices. We've got some doctors in the house. Seeing a lot of 2s, 3s. That's real. 3.5 in healing. Yes, lots of bugs going around. Seems like for months. 2s. Yep. So much going on for folks personally, professionally. We are whole people. We are educators that give everything to our career, our jobs, our students, but we're also people. So in the spirit of being whole people, let's just close our eyes if we feel comfortable and just on our own, ground our feet. Take 3 big breaths. Don't skip this. I used to be like, let me skip this and look at my phone. Just take 3 cleansing breaths together. Nourish your body. Release some of that tension that we've been holding. Unclench your jaw. Drop your shoulders. Big mindful breaths. One more. Sometimes it's 3 o'clock and I realize my shoulders are up here. My jaw is so tight. So release that. Thank you for being here. We're so glad to have you. So let's connect with each other. There's about 20 of us in this space. I want you to take a minute and to think. Think about how you learned how to read. What was that experience like for you? How does it impact you now as an educator? These are some of my little humans. One of them reading on his own, one reading with his dad. So much of our experience we bring into our jobs and into our teaching. Would like to invite 2 people to come off of mute and share. Not trying to put you on the spot. I just want us to connect with each other. We are going to be talking about the impact of stress and what that does to our students' brains. But I know that we are all holding so much stress. And one way that we can reduce our stress is by increasing our oxytocin. And one way that you can do that is through relationship with each other. So let's build relationship with each other. We have people in very, very Northern California, in San Diego, in Mammoth, Sacramento. So invite 2 people to come off of mute and share anything that's coming up for you. And if you don't want to come off of mute, but want to share in the chat, please feel free to do that. Would love to hear from you. Tell us who you are, where you're coming from, and anything you want to share about yourself as a whole person and a whole learner. Yes, Bianca, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bianca. I'm not shy. That's the first thing. Second thing is I've been married for almost 17 years. We just started couples therapy, and that's part of why I'm at it too. We have a 10-year-old son that's autistic, so that's been our life for almost more than half our marriage now. So needing to reconnect. And definitely that's been hard at work, just because then I see, I work with all these kids that have extra human needs, and I love it, but then I also take that home. So then that can be again hard. Um, but really excited for this workshop and happy to have been able to sign up for it because, there's just particularly one student that is just pretty much all Spanish speaking. And so just being able to just use a little bit of what I learned in the first session has been really nice so far. So, and I have a biopsy on Friday. So again, out of two.
Thank you so much for sharing, Bianca. Bianca, can you tell us a little bit about how you learned to read? What was
Oh
that
yeah.
like for you?
Sorry, did I forget that?
No, no, please.
So I'm the youngest of four girls, and my mom was very just loved teaching us how to read. She wasn't available emotionally, but educationally or through scholastic, like she was just there and for it. And being the youngest of four, it was like, I was always playing catch up. And so I wanted to do all those things. So by the time I was four, I could read and write in Spanish and English. So again, having a child that wasn't able to do that was very hard to see and watch and has been hard. But I think, yeah, it took my mom and it took siblings and older ones kind of just wanting to emulate them and talk to them, and then finding um, books and things like I love to read, like those Mr. and Miss books. I don't know if you guys remember those. Um, like Mr. Happy, Mrs. Grumpy, like all those. I just love them. And I actually just bought a collection of them because I was just like, that's so nostalgic to me.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think I see another hand raised. Welcome. Yes.
You know what? Thanks for posing the question. I learned, it made me think. I learned to read with my mother reading books to me at night. So really little, itty bitty, right? And so I remember Sleeping Beauty because of the big dragon and all of that. And then, growing up in a family that was very faith centered. So there was this book called More Little Visits with God. And it would be these little stories about, challenges and then how to have some inspiration in what to do. So I just remembering those stories and the moral of the story and it being relevant and connected to life, right? And it was meaningful. And then also thinking about singing and sounds. And so looking at words and singing and sounds and memorizing words and then looking at the paper. So how music was so inspirational in learning how to read and thinking of the letters and the sounds of letters rather. And then and I guess visuals, right? So picture books as well. And so then as I got older, believe it or not, my first teaching was in 8th grade. And so I used to start off my classes because I was a language arts reading teacher with affirmations. And so they would have, copies of affirmations. It was relevant, it was meaningful. I used to teach novels and all that, and the storyline, the moral of the stories within that, and the different themes. And so that translated from me being itty bitty to me being a teacher and teaching reading in that way.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I already feel my stress coming down, just being in community with all of you, building relationship with you. Anybody else? I see Monica is talking about walking to the library. I lived in this teeny tiny Central Valley town outside of Turlock, and there was a one-room tiny library. It was my cousin Carlos and I's favorite thing to do. We got old enough to go to the library down one street by ourselves. That was magic. So often when we talk about reading, especially post-COVID and post-distance learning, we hear a lot about learning loss, and we have to accelerate reading, and we have to get all of these technical skills for our students, which is so true. The reality of our country, of our state, is that only about a third of 5th and 8th graders are reading on grade level. And so it's true. Literacy reading, it's the civil rights issue of our time. Our young people need us to provide the best instruction, the best interventions. And And learning is integrated. Our students are whole people, they're whole learners, and so much of reading is intertwined with emotions and relationships. Yes, the public library, I see that. Ice cream, absolutely. All right, let's dive in, shall we? Okay, here we go. Executive functions, what are they? You saw that on the flyer to come to this. Executive functions are these set of skills. They act like the brain's air traffic control system. So picture an airport air traffic controller. Executive functions manage information. They help us avoid distractions. They help us to adapt in the moment to achieve our goals. We're all using our executive functions right now in this meeting. We've used them at work all day. So there's 3 core executive functions: inhibitory control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. They build to create more complex skills like problem solving, reasoning, planning, organization, self-monitoring, all skills we're using right now and all skills that our young people need all day long. So what does that look like for literacy? How do they connect? So now that we know what executive functions are, they're a part of these much broader set of skills that students need to be successful at school and in life. This is their specific role in literacy. If you see here, you see Scarborough's rope, which we've talked about, language comprehension on top, word recognition with the new science of reading initiatives. You've probably seen Scarborough's rope here, but here we have a adjusted model. So in this updated version, you see that researchers have added executive function intertwining because of its critical role in supporting and moderating reading development, alongside all of those components of language comprehension and word recognition. Executive functions, they're crucial for reading and writing skills on a neurobiological level and based on what we observe in kids reading. Can I have someone come off of mute and read this quote about executive functions and literacy?
Sure, I will.
Yes, thank you.
In short, reading equals hard mental work. Executive function integrates and synchronizes the many sub-processes involved in reading, such as phonological and orthographic aspects of word identification, retrieval of word meanings and concepts from long-term memory, and integration of prior knowledge with new information. EF is also involved when we deploy strategies to pace our reading appropriately, not too fast, not too slow, monitor comprehension, and repair comprehension breakdowns.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Whoa, that's a lot. I want you to remember one phrase from here. Reading equals hard mental work. You're 5, you're 12, you're 18. If you're on grade level, if you're below grade level, it's hard mental work. Here's a chart that shows all of the interconnections and interdependencies between executive functions and literacy skills. And there's many more than this, but I want you just to look at this list. I won't read them. And I want you to put in the chat or come off of mute or a smaller group. Which of these are surprising to you? Which of these have you not thought about? So take a minute and read those. It's just a few. Marga, yes, you will get this PowerPoint. We're going to send out resources after this on a 1-pager. Absolutely. Katie, Laura, I'll answer your question in the chat. There we go. Disregard irrelevant information. Something we might not think about. Yeah, absolutely. When I was teaching 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, there was like the main idea details. It's a skill to understand which is the most important, which isn't important. When you're learning to read and you work so hard to read every single word on that page, everything can feel really important. And we use and build our executive functions to be able to distinguish what is important and to disregard what's irrelevant. tracking the subject and the characters from page to page, those abstract ideas, a literacy task sequence. What are we going to do in what order? And remember back to that quote before, reading is hard mental work. Okay, we're going to keep going. Hot and cool executive functions. We've talked about executive functions. We've talked about how they're intertwined with literacy. Now we're going to take one step deeper. We talked about how when we were learning to read, think back to that. Go back to that place. That's why we did that connect. You were learning to read. What was it like reading independently or in front of your class? Which was easier? When a parent or a sibling, big sister, big brother, big cousin was listening to you read, or when your teacher was listening to you read? What felt harder? Which felt easier? One or two people to come off of mute. Put your answers in your chat. I want to see that we're a small group. I want us to talk with each other, to be in relationship and in community.
I have heard so many people specifically reference when they were kids, when the teacher would say, okay, we're going to read in a circle, counting how many people would be before them so they could figure out exactly what they were going to read because they were so nervous. I hear that one a lot.
Yeah, popcorn reading. Some people still remember, oh, popcorn reading is going to get tossed to me. Anybody else? What did it feel like when your teacher listened to you read?
It was interesting for me because I sound like when I read out loud, I sounded like a really good reader. I was really strong at like decoding and phonics, so I could read perfectly out loud. But so I felt very confident reading in front of the class because I was never then asked questions, like comprehension questions. But reading independently, I hated it because I would read 5 pages and then I would be like, I don't know what I just read. So that was my experience.
Yep. We all remember what it was like to read aloud, what it was like to read maybe in college and a course that wasn't your major. I remember in my one mandatory science class, I would have to read over one paragraph over and over and over again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. Our executive functions, our literacy, they're highly affected with our emotions and our stress because they're structurally and functionally intertwined in our brains. The brain successfully can regulate itself through a complicated set of hot and cool networks. They work in tandem and they create the right level for the situation at or task at hand. So these hot and cool networks, these opposing networks, they play in a really important role in adaptive self-regulation. And I see things happening in the chat. Please, we have incredible experts in here. We have Marga, we have Monica, we have probably over a century of literacy experience in the space. So all of these folks are here to help you, and thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so our top down, our cool network, it's made up of, here you see a picture of the brain. You see the prefrontal cortex and the connected structures. That's the part of the brain that we know controls our executive functions. It's called top down or cool because this network is towards the top of the brain. And this network also helps control and turn down or cool our level of arousal. When I say arousal, I mean specifically emotion, energy, and stress. And it's a slower, more thoughtful, complex, and really intentional network. When there is no emotion or stress related arousal, students are using their cool executive functions. I'm going to pause just for a moment because this might be really new information. I did not know any of this until I started working at the center. So lots of new information, and all of this will be shared. Now the hot network, the bottom up. It's made up of the amygdala It's a little almond-shaped organ in our brain. So the amygdala and its connected structures. We call it bottom up or hot because this network is towards the bottom of the brain. And this network helps react to and helps turn up that arousal, that emotion, energy, and stress. It's faster, it's more reactive, it's simple, and it's reflexive. So when there's emotional or stress-related arousal, students are using their hot executive functions. Got executive functions and literacy. Now we've got hot and cool networks and executive functions. So these really complex networks across the brain, they work together to adaptively regulate our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, and we need them both. We can't just have one, we need them both to be in balance, to be able to engage effectively in anything, including learning to read. So we're going to go into breakout groups. I'm going to put you in groups of 3. Here are some questions you can discuss as a group. During literacy, what are some things that trigger students' hot networks, the stress and those emotions? And what happens if those hot networks get over activated? So I'm going to put you in groups of 3. You'll have about 5 minutes and then choose one person to share out. Okay, when we come back. Let me open up those groups. All right, there we go. See you back in a few minutes. Say hello to build a relationship, a network with the people that you are in your group with, and we'll see you in a few minutes. You need help getting in your group, let us know. We can manually move you there. Or if you can't join a group right now because you're in transit or something else going on, you're just listening, totally okay. No need to worry. Miss Polanco, no worries. And I love to see that you are from Mammoth. When my mom and all of her siblings moved from Mexico in the early 70s, they moved right to Mammoth Lakes. My grandfather had a job there. Yes, Claudine, happy to. There you go, room 2. Whoever wants to share first, go ahead. Oh, not yet. Sorry. A few people are still coming back. Not yet. I got ahead of myself.
It's a good sign when people don't come back until the absolute last second. Probably means they have something juicy to say.
Sometimes I also just like instinctively click the button. I'm like, oh no. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for sharing, for being in groups. I hope you met somebody new. Maybe you can add them on LinkedIn and talk about literacy or connect. Know that everyone's going through the same challenges. Michelle, do you want to start the recording back up again? I had paused it earlier. Okay, whoever wants to share first, tell us your name, where you're coming to us from, and what your group shared.
Hi, I'm Kendra. We live in Sonora, California.
My
And-
uncle lives in Sonora. Hi.
Seriously?
Yes.
That's awesome. So we were just talking about like my class, for instance, is like the lowest of the 3rd grade classes. And so I have like half of my kids that are not even reading or able to attend to the 3rd grade curriculum. They're more in like 1st grade-ish. So I feel like they're always operating in their hot network because they're at the age now that they know where they're at and their peers also can see where they're at. And then also like Their self-confidence is struggling. So obviously I try not to call them out during like whole group reading or anything and just have them read with me one-on-one. Or I also think it kind of puts them in like a fight or flight mode where it like their hyperactive tendencies come out where they get distracted or destructive and need to have a movement break or stuff like that. So that's what we were kind of talking about.
Just the fact that you can name those things and understand those things is creating a supportive environment for your students. Because you're right, their fight, flight, freeze is probably happening because they're seeing this overwhelming task of reading as a threat, and they're just retreating.
Yeah.
Next person.
Well, my name is Dr. Anjab Carson, and I was in with Marga and I believe Michelle. And I work with the littles, the preschoolers, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So we're not really at the reading level, but they are fascinated with words and we're learning different vocabulary. I'm no longer in the classroom, but when I was in the classroom, I had to find ways to keep them active and engaged in what I was doing. And being that I'm a word fanatic, that was easy because I'm very animated with the kids. So I think I enjoyed it more than them. But I noticed that when children have behavior issues or children with learning disabilities, it was frustrating when they couldn't understand certain words. So visual cues and different things help me to explain different things to them more easily. So that's my life of preschool.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carson. Those youngest, tiniest humans, yeah, they're so amazing.
So I'm Anna Herrera. I met with another Elva and Lauren. And so we were all talking about how students have difficulty with literacy, become embarrassed or feel shamed. So many times they shut down, right? And then it's how do you break down that barrier? And because they shut down, sometimes that's where we begin to see the behaviors that come out, because they're always activated on the shame or embarrassment. And so being cognizant about not having students read out loud, how they're pronouncing words, if they mispronounce words, that can also put them into put that hot trigger on them and put that stress if you're constantly correcting them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do we have one more share? Dr. Carson, Sacramento, amazing. Hi. I love it. One more share.
In our group, we talked a little bit about how that hot network can be both great and challenging. You know, there's the students who experience more stress or shame or worry, and that can be enough to derail them. But then there's also the kids who maybe are so excited or really overly engaged or really hyped up about this book or want to impress you that they also can get derailed. So we're just talking about how that arousal and that excitement can look like a lot of different things, and that could be really interfering with that like calm, focus, stability, accessing all those skills that they have to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Hot network can be really positive. So I want to remember one thing from this hot network. So this is like a neurobiological process happening in their brains and in their bodies. So oftentimes as educators, and I'll speak for myself, I remember early on in my career thinking like, this student's choosing not to listen, or this student's choosing to misbehave. This student's choosing to, get out of their chair, etc. But I did not know what I know now about the way that what is happening in students' bodies and their brains on a neurobiological level. It seems like it's a choice, but if we pause and we know that things are happening in every single one of those young person's bodies when they're in our classroom. And I always say, we're taught as teachers, like what curriculum to teach. We're taught how to teach it. You know, like before that, I do, we do, you do, that we have to have small groups, whole group instruction. But we don't spend a lot of time ourselves as educators learning what is happening in our students' brains and bodies as they are learning. And so it's not that our students are choosing, it's that things are happening in their brain, networks across their brain are working. So just a reminder. And if you are like me and you are unlearning things that you learned early on in your career, maybe from a mentor teacher, from what you saw at your school, that's okay. We are always learning. We know now from research things we didn't know 5, 10, 15 years ago. So we are unlearning and relearning as educators, and that's okay. That's part of the process. Okay, I have a video here for you about the important role of stress and emotions. This is Dr. Mary Helen Immordino Yang. I highly recommend you follow her on LinkedIn. She is a pioneer about learning being integrated and the work that we do at the center. This is a short video. We'll just watch a few minutes, but I want you to remember that learning is integrated. And we'll share this at the end in the one pager so you can watch the whole thing. Here we go.
My name is Mary Helen Immordino Yang. I'm an affective neuroscientist and an educational psychologist at the University of Southern California. And I study the ways in which children's emotional and social relationships shape their learning and also shape the brain development that undergirds their learning so that they can learn better into the future. And I'm going to start my talk with a picture of my children's jack-o'-lanterns from a few years ago. And the reason is that I think that the jack-o'-lantern is a really fantastic visual metaphor for how children learn. Inside of each one of those little pumpkins is a fire burning, a fire that consumes oxygen and that shines out through that child's actions and through that child's beliefs and through that child's learning in the world. And, you know, historically we've thought, and scientists even thought, that emotions interfere with clear-headed thinking, that in order to learn well, we needed to get our emotions out of our thought, we needed to take our self out of it, we needed to take our feelings out of it, and instead just focus in a kind of pure way on the cognitive skill that we're trying to develop. And what we're learning with our new neuroscientific research is that nothing could be further from the truth in the way that human brains actually learn. And this makes good sense evolutionarily because the ordinary purpose of our brain is to keep us alive. It's to steer our actions and our thoughts and behaviors so that we remember the things that matter, so that we learn the things that we think are going to need in the future, and we don't attend to or spend a lot of time thinking about the stuff that we think doesn't matter or that we think is not important. To demonstrate what I mean, I have a little poem written by a kindergartner about her baby brother named Theodore. She calls him Teddy. And you can see a little picture of her up here with her little pink dress and crayon. And underneath, she's written out her poem. And it says, "Oh, Teddy, we love you more than the whole earth size. As the earth spins every day, we love you as much as usual, but sometimes even more, as you make us proud and happy that you're you." I have a simple question for you. Is that a poem about this little girl's love for her baby brother? Or is that a poem about her budding knowledge of planetary science? Our emotions and our relationships and our cultural experiences in the social world literally organize and shape the development of brain networks that allow us to learn. Over the course of the morning, you're going to hear from my colleagues about their work describing how children's identities, how children's emotional experiences in the learning environments they're exposed to are influencing what they're capable of doing. And I want you to take this information very seriously, because this isn't just sort of a recent fad about how people learn to make people happier or something like that. This is literally shaping and changing and recruiting brain networks for memory and emotion that will not be recruited any other way. It is literally neurobiologically impossible to think about things deeply or to remember things about which you've had no emotion.
It is literally neurobiologically impossible. Ooh, I want to pause there for a minute. She says emotional processes are structurally and functionally intertwined with and often the same as the cognitive capacities required for learning. Learning is integrated. She said the word networks that we've been talking about this afternoon, networks across the brain. So if there's too much of that cool network, if it's not in balance, if there's no hot activation, our students become bored and disengaged. So we don't want that. We don't want too much cool. If there's too much hot activation, well, we get what we talked about a moment ago in our breakout rooms. Upset, distracted, unable to focus. We've all seen that. We've all seen those students that are maybe checked out a bit, not engaged, looking out the window, slumped in the chair, but they're not making any noise. They're not being disruptive. And so they just kind of go under our radar. We need this balance of hot, of this emotion, these excitement, this good stress, and that cool, that regulation, that focus, those executive functions in order to be able to learn, in order to be able to do the really hard mental work of reading. What's resonating with you so far? Yeah, Marga says exactly. If we don't care about it, we can't learn it. What's resonating with you about these hot and these cool networks, about executive functions? Feel free to put it in the chat or come off of mute. I love all the sharing. Tell us where you're from. Marissa says, always trying to find a balance.
One of the challenges that when I'm thinking about all this is I work with, all of my students are 4 to 7 years old with severe disabilities, extensive support needs. And so they have, most of them have diagnosis of autism, intellectual disability. And so often they are in a stress state for one reason or another, sensory wise, different antecedents coming to school, that sort of thing. And just how I can, and I obviously try to make an environment that is supportive of them to help them get to a place where they can learn and access the parts of their brain necessary for reading and all kinds of learning, really. And but yeah, so this is just an ongoing thing that that we deal with, and how I see other people trying to dive right into learning without really addressing this piece of how important them being at an emotionally regulated state, is, and how to help them get there and stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to share that we have Marga in the room. She's an incredible resource. She's doing incredible work. So thankful that she's on this project. So I just wanted to, Rachel, do a little ping for Marga. She's in this space if you want to message her or have any questions. She's a real treasure.
Thank you.
Seems like it could be a fine line. Yeah, absolutely. I say Ms. Rosales said, this has worried me about a few students. We see them disengaged and what, yeah. Laura brought that up too. We start to lose some students sometimes if we just want all of the cool networks. Dr. D says, my goal is to create stress-free learning environments and support the internal dialogue that happens in our students. Our students are brilliant. We can create supportive environments for them, stress-free, but remember, there's good stress. Yeah. Thank you all so much for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. So what I love about working at the center is that the science tells us a really optimistic story about what's possible for young people. We know that all young people have boundless potential. And we know now what we didn't know decades ago, years ago. We know how to create the conditions to help every child thrive, and we know that they can be intentionally cultivated. We can create those environments. We can build those relationships. We can teach and build those executive functions. Those are all part of centering a whole learner, that whole child purpose in our schools and our classrooms. So gave you some input about executive functions, about hot and cool networks, about learning being integrated. And now we're getting to my favorite part of PD. Don't want you to leave thinking, now what? We have some best practices and some resources for you that I'm really excited to share. Okay, so research clearly indicates that strategies for managing stress and emotions are best learned when students have the opportunity to practice them in authentic context and with support. We can help our students practice these skills within literacy instruction, both to support their executive functions in that moment and to build those skills over time. If you already have an SEL program at your school, in your classroom, or strategies for managing stress and emotions, you can prompt students to use those skills explicitly during literacy. So this is what I want you to remember about this. So often our day is broken up into our ELA block, our math block, our writing block, and then we have a portion for SEL. And we treat them separately. There's different PD about SEL and academics. There's different budgets. There's different curriculums. There's different times in the schedule. But that's not how the brain works. Remember what Dr. Imordino Yang said. Learning is integrated. Yes, if you are having morning meeting, if you're having advisory, if you're having, your SEL lessons on Fridays. I used to do all of those things as a teacher. That's great. You're on to a great start. And what we can do, what science and research tells us, is that when we teach those skills during authentic context, we are helping our students build these over time. So here are some ways that could look like. Check-ins, whole group regulation strategies, individual supports for stress management, emotional connections to text and characters. You could do an emotions wheel. You could ask your class on a 5 to 5, how are you feeling about reading today? Just like we asked you at the beginning, 0 to 5, how are you feeling? Do it specifically about reading. How are you feeling about the, ELA class or reading block? As you coach individual students during reading, you can ask them questions about their comprehension of the text and how they're feeling about the reading. You can do what we did earlier in this session. You can practice a moment of mindful breathing together to lower our hot network and increase our cool network before you do a phonics lesson or a read aloud. You can do if you have older kids and you have a longer reading block, you can do a mid-block energizer, something physical, a jumping jacks, a turn and talk to activate that positive network, that hot network, that positive stress. I'm sure that we have stress management strategies in place. You can bring those up during literacy. If you notice a student is struggling to focus during literacy instruction, you can prompt them to go to a calm corner or a cool down zone. Not teaching these skills in isolation, but noticing when our students are using those proactively and prompting our students to use them so that they can themselves will be able to independently use those later. You can ask students to make connections to characters' identity, how they manage something difficult. You can ask students to reflect on an experience. These are all things that we are probably already doing. So this is just a reminder of how they're connected and how they support students' literacy development. I want to share a tool with you here. This is a sample lesson plan that guides this asset-oriented approach to developing this repertoire of shared skill development strategies with students. So in this lesson plan, there are some examples for supporting stress management. Laura's going to be putting it in the chat. So it's not just about telling our students to take deep breaths or to go to a calm down corner. It's about being intentional about teaching these skills during a lesson and being intentional about planning these out in our schedule in our day, just as we would a phonics lesson or a comprehension lesson. I'm going to pause and give you 2 minutes to review this lesson, this tool. And then Laura and I will be available for any questions that you might have. Please let us know if you're having any trouble accessing it. And we'll share this after the lesson as well, after the session. I see people diving in. Okay. So here you'll see a sample student strategy, a stress management plan. So in this strategy, students create a plan for how they'll manage stress, how they'll get support when they're stressed, doing this graphic organizer. Students can brainstorm challenging behaviors, challenging feelings that they might experience. They're nervous, they're angry, they're sad. And then there's a list of strategies they can use, like drawing, getting a stress ball, taking deep breaths, and a list of people that they can go to support, for support. There's a box breath, there's a memory game, there's a head, heart, hand strategy, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 strategy. So you'll find all of this on that link. So encourage you to maybe pick a few students. Use one of these strategies. Students that we know might feel their hot network overwhelmingly during literacy. Be intentional about a strategy that you could share with them. Try it out for a few days. Try it out for a week. So often as teachers, we have to reactively respond to students' behavior. And so this is just an invitation to proactively choose some students that might benefit from this. Give it a try. These are all things that any teacher of any tenure can implement tomorrow. And that's what I love about these tools. It's not a curriculum, it's not prescriptive, it's just a way of thinking about our students' holistic development, and specifically when it comes to literacy, what we're talking about today. Okay, one more tool. This is called the Executive Functions and Literacy Strategy Bank. This is a great one. We've learned about executive functions. We've learned about these hot and cold networks. How can I support them for our students? Laura's put it in the chat. So here are a few strategies that you can use. Gives you the strategy, the description, and then it tells you how it builds or supports our students' executive functions. So checking for understanding. We were taught about that in our teacher prep program. Everyone should check for understanding when you give directions. So if the instructions are new, ask 1 or 2 students to repeat them back to the class. I'm sure all of us have done that, do that. What that does, it supports holding the information in their working memory. Remember we said there are 3 types of executive functions. Working memory is one of them. We're already doing things to support our executive functions. This is just small reminders, small micro actions that we can take during the day. Breaking down complex processes, chunk the information that you provide, break down a process into steps. That lowers the demand on our working memory. It supports our students' executive functions. It helps us balance those hot and cool networks. We're going to go back into our groups. If you're traveling, that's okay. You don't have to come off camera, but I hope you can go back into your groups and chat again with the folks you're in community with. These 2 questions I have for you. What are strategies that you use to build excitement and emotional connections in literacy and to address student stress and help them regulate emotions? Let's be in community together. Let's share incredible things that we're doing. This is give you permission to brag about yourself, brag about things that you've seen, that you've done, that you've seen at your school. So I'm going to open up those breakout rooms. We're almost done. We're getting to the end. We're going to lower those shoulders, release that jaw, opening up those groups again. And we'll see you back in a few minutes. We're almost at the end here. So close. Guest one. So I'm just so happy to see all of you in your classrooms. I so miss being in the classroom. Okay. Come off of mute and share. There's about 20 of us in this space. We needed more time. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't want to get you guys out of here late. Okay. Share what are some strategies used. If you don't want to share out loud, put it in the chat and we'll share some of these in the 1-pager follow-up that we share out. But would love to hear all of the brilliance. We're in NorCal, we're in San Diego, we're in Sacramento, we're in Sonora. Many of us together trying to support our young people. Yes, Sonora friends, go for it. So you come.
So we talked just kind of about the constant balance between the hot and the cool, and I'd never really thought about it that way. Just things that I think with years of experience, right? We've always learned that balance of trying to keep them engaged, but not super heightened. And we were discussing that like when they come in from maybe something at home and they're heightened, just trying how do we get them to kind of calm down when they come in. So like, greeting them at the door and things. And then we talked about brain breaks and different ways that we kind of naturally have always tried to regulate and keep them balanced or in the middle. But things that I guess we do without even realizing we're doing it, like not thinking about the science behind it, but just from experience, knowing how to keep the kids engaged in that delicate dance. But we talked about some of the different strategies of just building a connection in the morning and trying to get them kind of settled and comfortable, or then keeping them engaged by having a brain break in the middle of a lesson. Reaching for prior knowledge to get them to have that personal connection to something we're doing, things like that.
Absolutely. I love that. I like what you said. All things that we knew, but we just didn't know the science behind it. Yeah. All things we're already doing to support our students' executive functions. Yeah, absolutely. Teacher modeling, taking breaks. Claudine, yes, go for it.
And I was sharing in that group, one of the things that that I teach is dual language, Spanish dual language. So my language hat, the Spanish language hat, is always on. My cultural hat is always on. So I'm always thinking about the cultural and linguistic background. So what I do is I can either try to get the information from Aries, or at the beginning of the year, I ask them, where's your family from? And I try to get the information. Oh, I have some from Honduras, from Colombia, from El Salvador, from Mexico, from just wherever the countries. And then I write my list down. Actually, we have some from the Philippines, from Chinese as well. So my lens, when I'm picking out stories, I always highlight, oh, we have a story from the Philippines. So-and-so, you're from the Philippines. Wow, let's read about it. And then, oh, this is a story from Columbia. And so my lens is always and my hat's always on. And then another thing I do is we have like Epic and Raz Kids. I go into Raz Kids and I assign to the whole class every single book that I can find on the different cultures. And then the students are like, hey, this book is from Colombia. So they can see themselves in the books that they read. And then I highlight, I said, oh, this time is we're reading a book from, the Philippines. Next time we'll read a book from wherever. So I'm always like, in who's from Honduras? Of course, all in Spanish, but just so that they can see themselves in the literature that everyone is valuable. And then the next book will be about you, about your family, about your culture and country. And if it's not about yours, you'll learn about somebody else's. So that's kind of the connection that I like to make with the students in my classroom.
I love that. Love it. Who else can we hear from? I know there's a lot of brilliance in this group.
I met with Dr. Gell, who works with preschoolers, and she was talking about doing read alouds with the little ones, just getting them connected and having them count and like interact with the book as they're going, because we're really at that age trying to just build a love of reading and story sharing with the little ones. And so that was fun to hear more about.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just the language. I remember I heard a mentor teacher once say, books are treasures, when a kinder threw a book on the ground. And that always stuck with me. Over 15 years later, I now even say it to my own students, oh, books are treasures. Just the words we choose to talk about books and reading builds that excitement, builds that connection with literacy. If you didn't want to share out loud, that's okay. Put it in the chat. We've come to the closing. We've made it. You've done it. Like I said earlier, what I love working here is that I get to feel hope in my job every day, because we have research and science that we didn't have before that tells us about what is possible for our young people. We can change their experience by the way that we build their skills, by the way that we build their stress management skills, their executive functions, by the supportive environments we build and create, talking about their identities, their home countries, greeting them in the morning, but the positive relationships that we create with them. We can create environments for our young people to thrive. I want to keep building trust and relationship in this space. I want you to share an appreciation for yourself in the chat. It is so hard to do. Please, I give you permission to brag about yourself. You all came to this meeting on a Monday at 4 p.m. to learn in service of your students, in service of yourself as an educator. I'm so grateful that you're here. I want to read in the chat, every single person, something positive, appreciation that you have for yourself. Okay. I'll put a little music on. Those appreciations for yourself come in. Like somebody's heart it, give them a fire. Not appreciations for us, appreciations for you. Dr. Carson, can you share your appreciation aloud for us, please? It is so beautiful.
Or I said that I appreciate me being a determined, persistent individual with lots of tenacity to keep moving forward no matter the obstacles or circumstances. I refuse to give up because I am greatness.
Oh, I want us all together, come off of mute, and I want us all to say that last sentence together. I refuse to give up because I am greatness. And I want you to remember what I said. Only about a third of our students across our state are reading on grade level. We have a big task ahead of us, but I want us to read that last sentence together on the count of 3. Ready? 2, 3.
I refuse to give up because I am greatness.
Thank you, Dr. Carson.
You're welcome.
Okay, this is what you have coming for you in a follow-up email. Link to recording, a one-pager, the visuals, the videos, and a certificate of participation. So for those of you that need some kind of documentation for completing the hours, put your name, need certificate, and your email address. We'll collect that. You are doing so much to develop yourself as a reader, to address this civil rights issue of our time. And I saw it in the chat, literacy is freedom. So I'm so thankful that you are here. We also have a quick exit ticket. Please tell us how we're doing, how we can support you. All of us here at Product Arise are here because of you. Our job is to support you as you support our young people. Yes, need certificate. Great, great, great. For the survey, is this a workshop? Yes, this is a workshop. Here you'll see all of the other free workshops that are available across the state. So anybody in California can attend these for free. From us, from TNTP, from Center for Intensive Intervention, San Diego County Office of Ed. We have Monica Aguirre. She is a star in multilingual, for multilingual learners, incredible educator. We have so many incredible folks in Project Arise, so please join any of these. You can follow Project Arise, get your phones out, on Facebook, on X, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, to hear about these workshops, to learn about what we're doing. We have courses just on executive functions that are for free, that you can take, that your colleagues can take to deepen your knowledge. They're written by Laura Sykes, my amazing colleague. They are incredible. Lastly, here's our email, mine and Laura's, at the Center for Whole Child Education, wholechild@asu.edu. You can access our tools. You can follow us on the socials, as the young people say. We'd love to connect with you. You can add Laura and I. We can answer any questions. So glad you're here. Laura and I are going to stay on for the next 12 minutes. If you have any specific questions about literacy, whole child, holistic lens literacy, we're here. Everybody else, thank you so much. So much love to you all. Thank you. Thank you. Hope to see you at the next one. Can't wait to connect. Bye, everyone. Happy Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.